you all so much for coming to this naturalization webinar with USCIS. My name is Verity. I am the Adult Services Librarian at the Mechanicsville branch of the Pamunkey Regional Library. PRL and the United States Citizen and Immigration Services have partnered together for this program to talk about naturalization and the information that you need to become a U.S. citizen. We are joined today by Gloria Williams-Brevard, a Community Relations Officer from USCIS. She will be presenting and she will be available to answer questions at the end. Please make sure to keep your microphones off during the presentation. There will be time, like I said, at the end for questions. And you can submit questions in the chat if you want to, but they will be read at the end again during the Q&A portion. This program is going to be recorded. So if you don't wish to be recorded, also make sure to keep your camera off. And if you have any questions after the webinar is over, feel free to reach out to the library. It's ask@pamunkeyregionallibrary.com, or if you have any need for resources, we can always help you out. And then if you're interested in other programs offered at the library, just make sure to check out our calendar on our website and to follow us on Facebook. So with that, I'm going to get us started and hand it over to Gloria to show us her presentation.
Good evening. I want to first of all thank the Pamunkey Regional Library and certainly thank those of you all who are attending for wanting to learn more about the naturalization process and becoming a U.S. citizen. And so again, I just want to say thank you. This is my disclaimer here, that if you are a member of the media, that this is an educational presentation, and that if you have any press questions, that you should direct them to our press office at 202-272-1200. We're going to talk about the objectives tonight, the rights and responsibilities of U.S. citizenship, the naturalization eligibility requirement, and the naturalization process. And so I want to start off by giving a definition of what citizenship through naturalization is. Naturalization is the process by which U.S. citizenship is granted to a foreign citizen or national after he or she fulfills the requirements established by Congress in the Immigration and Nationality Act, or the INA. And so again, the definition is found in the Naturalization Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the U.S. Constitution. And the Supreme Court of the U.S. says that naturalization is the act of adopting a foreigner and clothing him with the privileges of a native citizen. And so even as we talk tonight about the naturalization process, please remember that the information that I'm sharing with you is to get you excited about becoming a citizen. The United States will not make you become a citizen. You choose naturalization. And so even as we go through this presentation, I want you to keep those things in mind. And again, when you're talking about choosing naturalization, I would like to challenge you. If somebody asked you in 6 words, why you would want to apply for citizenship, then think of those 6 words. And maybe at the end, some of you all, if you have thought about the 6 words, maybe then that is something that we can talk about. And so again, when we talk about becoming a citizen and that it is your choice, if after tonight's presentation you decide, I don't want to be a citizen, I want to continue to be a lawful permanent resident, you certainly have that choice to do so. We just encourage you to remember that there are responsibilities as a lawful permanent resident, that you must file your tax returns, that you must get a Social Security number. And if you are a male between the ages of 18 and 26, you must register with the Selective Services. And you must keep your permanent resident card up to date. So I'm going to assume you have a permanent resident card that is expiring. All of the cards we've issued in the past almost 20 years have an expiration date and are only valid for 10 years. And so if you've got a green card in your pocket right now that is actually green, or it does not have a photo, or it has that beautiful photo of you when you were a baby, then I know that you've had that card a very, very long time, and that you probably have not even traveled recently outside of the United States, because the officer at the airport would have certainly reminded you to have replaced your card. I want to talk about some trends in naturalization. In fiscal year 2008, 1.05 million people filed for naturalization. Going up through the years, fiscal year 2019, 900,000 plus people filed for naturalization. And on an annual average, we naturalize 680,000 new citizens through the naturalization process, and that we welcome approximately 1 million lawful permanent residents. So again, when you talk about choosing to be naturalized, I do want to highlight that I physically sit in the Washington field office, which is in Fairfax, Virginia. And so, the offices had closed in June, but I do want to highlight that the Washington field office, when they reopened in June, from June to September, they naturalized almost 4,400 people. Again, as every field office focuses on those applicants who were eligible for naturalization. And so again, when we still talk about what are the trends in naturalization, the top 5 countries that people apply for naturalization, they're from Mexico, India, Philippines, People's Republic of China, and the Dominican Republic. And again, when we talk about eligible candidates, believe it or not, Virginia is in the top 10 states of residence when you talk about people who are eligible to be naturalized, and those 8.8 million lawful permanent residents that are eligible, from California to New York, Texas, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Washington, Arizona, and as I said, Virginia makes it up in the top 10 states. And so again, we talked about where people are from. When we talk about country of birth, they're from Mexico, Philippines, China, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Canada, El Salvador, India, United Kingdom, and Vietnam. And so when we talk about the rights and responsibilities of naturalization, why do people choose to naturalize? Well, they want to vote. We know that the upcoming election is going to be in a few days for the president, but there are also other local elections. And so as a naturalized citizen, we want you to not forget about those other local elections, like your congressional representatives. But certainly everybody wants to be able to vote, to be able to choose their candidate for presidency. You can apply for a U.S. passport. You can run for elected office. You could work for the U.S. government. I have been with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for over 30 years. I am a legacy INS employee, and maybe you feel that you want my job, and that's fine, but you have to be a citizen to be able to apply. One of the other benefits of naturalization is that you get to upgrade your family petition, and you certainly get to serve on a jury. We've already talked about the definition for naturalization, and so let's go to something called a statutory period. When I am applying for naturalization, the time that I submit my N-400 application, the agency is looking at that 5-year period prior, or that 3-year period if I am applying for naturalization based on being married to a U.S. citizen. And we will talk about that more in detail in a couple of minutes. And so again, if I am thinking about this example here talks about if I were applying in 2017, the 5-year prior period would be 2012. This is 2020. And so the 5-year statutory period prior to me submitting my application would be 2015. So the general filing requirements for naturalization is you have to be 18 years old to file the N-400. You must be a U.S. lawful permanent resident. We're going to talk a little bit about the continuous resident and physical present requirement, and we're going to talk about the U.S. district where you apply, what good moral character means, and what it means to show that you have a basic understanding of English, the knowledge of U.S. history and government, and the examples for showing your attachment to the U.S. Constitution. As a permanent resident, Most people apply for naturalization because they have been a permanent resident for 5 years or for 3 years based on being married to a U.S. citizen. And then if you are a member of the military, then you are not necessarily bound by 3 years or 5 years. We thank you for your service. And when we start talking about the continuous presence, physical presence and continuous residency, again, as a military personnel, these types of requirements will not apply to you. If you are applying for permanent resident based on being married to a U.S. citizen, we think of this as the 333 rule. And so these three things have to be in place at the time you file your N-400 application. You must have been a permanent resident for at least 3 years. You must have been married to a U.S. citizen for at least 3 years. And that U.S. citizen spouse must have been a citizen for 3 years. And so again, if you are applying for naturalization based on marriage, then we don't want you to think it's strange when it is time for your interview and the officer spends a lot of time asking you about the status of your marriage. If you come to the interview and you tell the officer, oh, something happened, the marriage didn't work out and we're currently separated, then that could impact your eligibility for filing for naturalization under this 333 rule, which is under a particular section of law. And so again, if you're filing for naturalization based on being married to a U.S. citizen, keep in mind that these three requirements have to be in place at the time you submit your application. We're going to talk a little bit about something called continuous residence. Continuous residence means that the applicant has maintained residence in the United States for a required period of time. Certainly, you are allowed to travel. When you are a permanent resident, you can travel as frequently as you would like. But again, when we talk about eligibility for naturalization, absences between 6 months and 1 year may disrupt an applicant's continuous residence requirement unless the applicant can prove otherwise. Absences from the United States of one continuous year or more during that 5-year statutory period disrupts continuous residence. And I'd like to think of continuous residence as, where do you keep your stuff? This is different from physical presence, which we're getting ready to talk about in a moment. Physical presence wants to know where you physically were. And so again, when you look at this chart here, hopefully you find it helpful. Getting back to it, it says less than 6 months, you've met the requirement. And see, my chart doesn't want to stay. 6 months to a year, you may have to provide additional evidence. And then certainly if you stay outside of the United States for more than 1 year, you have not met that requirement. And understand that every 24 hours equals 1 day. And so when we talk about why do days matter, when we go to what physical presence requirements are, then you will see what those days are. So physical presence is cumulative. And so that means that in that 5-year period, we encourage you to travel. It will be your responsibility, though, when you are timing to submit your application for naturalization, to determine that cumulatively you have the physical presence required as indicated. You have to show that if you're applying for naturalization based on being a permanent resident for 5 years, that you have physically resided in the United States for 913 days. And if it's based on 3 years, that you have physically resided in the United States 548 days. And so again, it's the total number of days that the applicant is in the United States during that 5-year statutory period that is prior to you submitting the N-400. And the physical presence requirement changes depending on how you qualify. And so again, if you're basing it on marriage, it's different. If you're basing it on the 5-year, it's different. And so again, this is cumulative. It's the time that is all added up. I've had questions where people ask, well, if I go outside of the United States, I have been outside for 8 months, which is more than 6 months, but less than a year. Can I apply for naturalization? Well, let's go back. Are you eligible according to the continuous residency requirement? You were outside for less than a year, and can you show that you have accumulated 548 days based on 3 years permanent residency, or 913 days based on 5-year permanent residency. Now we're going to go up. Continuing our conversation, the jurisdiction requirement says that where you have lived in the 3 months prior to submitting your application, that office that will be interviewing you must have jurisdiction. And so how do you show that that office has jurisdiction over your application? You can show your driver's license. You can show your rent receipt, your bank statements, your utility statements. And so you must live in the USCIS district where you apply for naturalization for at least 3 months before you apply. Now, the Pamunkey Regional Library is in the part of Virginia that is under the jurisdiction of the Norfolk Field Office. And so again, if you are living in that area, then your application would be under their jurisdiction. But if you live up in Fairfax, Virginia, then you would be under the jurisdiction of the Washington Field Office. And then if you are a student away at school, then you have a choice. You can submit your application to be under the jurisdiction of the district office where your school is, or you can choose to be under the jurisdiction of the office where your parents reside. We're going to talk a little bit about good moral character. Just like there's a statutory requirement regarding the 5 years prior, there is a good moral character requirement. So then anyone convicted of murder or an aggravated felony is permanently barred from being able to apply for U.S. citizenship. And there are certain crimes that could impact your eligibility. There are certain driving under the influence charges that won't impact your eligibility, but then there are some driving under the influence charges that will impact it. And so if you've got any of those types of issues in your background, then it may be beneficial for you to seek legal advice to determine whether or not you are eligible to file for naturalization. Not paying your income taxes. Again, we talked about having an arrest for driving under the influence, having a criminal conviction, or even failing to pay court-ordered child support are those types of issues, in addition to those questions on the N-400 application that asks you, have you ever been involved in prostitution? Are you a habitual drunkard? Are you a habitual gambler? Have you ever brought anybody to the United States against their will? And so there is a portion on the N-400 where you are answering yes or no. There is a question that asks, have you ever been arrested or cited by a USCIS official or a police officer or a military officer? And so that's one of the only questions where, even though we're talking about that 5-year statutory period, that question asks you ever. And so even if you've got a traffic citation and it is outside of the 5-year scope, it is to your responsibility for you to include that on your application. It may not impact your eligibility for naturalization, but you are taking the time to truthfully and fully answer that question that asks you, have you ever? And especially if you may have committed a crime outside of the United States, and we go and we do your biometrics processing, and in the background processing, we come up with an arrest record that you failed to talk about on your N-400 because you didn't think it needed to be included because the crime did not occur in the United States. And so again, remember that that question asks, have you ever? So we're looking at ever as opposed to just the 5 years prior to you submitting your application. I also want to talk about examples, other examples of certain crimes are controlled substance violations. And so you may live in a state where it's okay to smoke marijuana. It's not considered a crime, but for naturalization purposes, the good moral character requirement says that controlled substance violations, including those relating to marijuana, even in states that have decriminalized it, and other violations of state or federal law affect that good moral character expectation. And so again, even being under probation, impacts that good moral character requirement. And if you're under probation, it is your responsibility to go to the court clerk and to get a documentation that show if your probationary period has ended, that you have completed the terms of the probation. I want to, again, go on to the next slide. This talks about your responsibility of having an ability to read, write, and understand English, and to have a knowledge of U.S. history and civics. And we're going to go over this chart here that gives an example of there are some applicants that at the time of filing, if they meet the age requirement and the length of time as a permanent resident, then they will not have to take the English test, and the civics portion, they'll be able to take in their own language. Now, you have to have both the age requirement and the length of time as a permanent resident in place at the time of filing. I know you have been following the backlog issues that the agency has had, and so you can't submit your application at age 49 and a half and say, oh, I know they have a backlog, so by the time they schedule me for my interview, I'll be 50 years old, and then I will have passed that age requirement. Nope, it is your responsibility at the time of filing to have both the age and the length of time. So 50 years old, permanent resident for 20 years, 55 years old, permanent resident for 15 years. You'll be able to be exempt from the English test, to take the civics test in your language. And if you're 65 years old, permanent resident for 20 years, you will be exempt from the English test. And then we will choose questions that we consider simplified that you will be tested on for your knowledge regarding U.S. history and civics. I want to go over this disability form N648. There are some applicants who have a medical condition or even a mental condition that impairs their ability to learn or demonstrate their knowledge of English or civics. And if they cannot learn English, then they cannot be expected to be tested on it. Only a doctor can complete the Form 648, and the doctor must certify that there is a relationship between the fact that you cannot learn English and the condition. And so when the doctor certifies that, then we will be able to say, okay, we cannot test you because the doctor has certified it. Now, we understand in this COVID-19 environment that some of you all may be eligible to file this form N648, but you've been unable to make a doctor's appointment because prior to us closing the offices, the requirement was for you to have the N648 form attached to the N400 form when you submitted it for filing. But again, we recognize that there are some doctor's offices that may still be closed or that may be offering limited services, and therefore you've not been able to see a doctor to be able to complete the N648. However, if you are going to be considered for the N648, you can bring the N648 form with you to your interview and explain to the officer the challenges that you had regarding it. We're going to talk a little bit about the attachment to the Constitution, what it shows. You've got to show that you are attached to the Constitution. And one of the ways that you show it is in reciting the words to the oath of allegiance. Those are the words that you say at your oath ceremony for naturalization, but they are printed on the back of the N400 form. And at the time of the interview, the officer will review those words with you to make sure that you understand what the words mean. The words say, some of the parts of the oath say that you are willing to bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law. And so basically that means that if the United States reinstituted a draft and the draft was for both male and female, would you have a problem bearing arms if the law required you to do so? The oath ends with the word saying that you take this oath without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help you God. Do you have a problem referencing the phrase God? And so if you have a problem with the bearing of the arms or doing non-combatant work on behalf of the United States when required by the law. If you have a problem renouncing your allegiance to the country that you came from, those are the things that you're going to discuss with the officer at the interview. And so if you have any issues, it is at the interview that you will bring these issues up. We're going to talk now about what happens at the interview. At the interview, the immigration service officer is going to place you under oath. They're going to administer to you the reading and writing test. They're going to give you the CIVICS test. They're going to determine, do you have the ability to speak and understand English? And they're going to review the N-400 form. And so again, in the review of the N-400 form, the officer is determining, do you understand English? Especially when you get to those yes and no questions for good moral character. There's a question that asks you, are you a terrorist? And certainly if you don't understand what that means, then the officer is going to have a concern regarding your good moral character. If the officer during the interview speaks to you and says some things that you do not understand, then it is your right to ask the officer to please rephrase what they're saying, to speak louder, to speak slower. And again, if there's anything that happens at the interview that you don't feel should have happened, you always have the right to ask for a supervisor before you leave the office. And so again, we're going to talk about the sample interview, what happens and what do we look like now that we have opened since June. I do want to remind you
Sorry about that, everybody. I think we might have lost Gloria for a second. Just hold on one quick minute.
So again, when we talk about the portion for the reading and the writing portion, you see the example of the iPad, and as I said, there's a possibility that you would be in a separate room. And so if you would go to the next slide, please. And again, this is an example of a sentence that could possibly be asked for you to read out loud. Who is the president? And so again, how do you get better at English? You get better by practicing reading, practicing writing. And so you could go to the next tablet. Again, when we talk about the writing portion, the officer, again, will dictate up to 3 sentences. On the next slide, please. Will dictate up to 3 sentences for you to write under their direction. And similar, both the reading portion and the writing portion, if you sit there and you don't even try to write the sentence, and you don't even try to read the sentence, then the officer could determine that that means you do not understand English well enough to get the naturalization benefit that you are seeking. You can go to the next slide, please. And so again, when we talk about the writing test and the next slide, we have given examples for both the writing test and the speaking test. And as I said, it shows the difference between what you have to do to pass and what you have to do if the officer fails you. The next slide, please. Going down to slide 28, please. When we talk about loyalty to the United States, we already talked about the attachment to the Constitution. We talked about examples of the wording in the Oath of Allegiance. And so again, the officer's job is to make sure that you are eligible for this naturalization benefit that you are seeking. You can go to the next slide, please. And so remember, you are paying currently $725. $640 for the N-400 application, $85 for the biometrics processing to get to this end of the road point where you can raise your right hand and recite the words to the Oath of Allegiance. Certificates of naturalization are prepared and issued as proof of citizenship at the oath ceremony. And so especially now, it is very important that if you cannot get to your ceremony, that you send that form N-445 with a short letter explaining the reason why you could not make it. And so on the N-445 form that invites you to the ceremony, it asks you, again, questions between the time of the interview and the oath ceremony. Have you traveled outside of the United States? It asks you, has your marital status changed? And it asks you, have you been arrested? And so we are still interested in those three areas of your life regarding your application from the time of the interview to the time of the oath ceremony. And if there's any information that has changed, then you must complete that. I want to give you an example of a determined applicant. A couple of weeks ago, our Baltimore field office, the field office director went to the home of a candidate who was 103 years old so that he could administer the oath of allegiance to that candidate in their home. So can you imagine somebody being 103 years old and still wanting to become a citizen? You can go to the next slide, please. So when we talk about, again, filing for naturalization, the N-400 form, all of our forms you can download from the website for free. When you talk about the N-400 form, the N-400 form, the I-90 form, application to replace permanent resident card, and the I-130 petition for alien relative are the top three popular forms that people download from our website. And so again, when we talk about what are the benefits of filing online, we're going to talk a little bit about that because we're trying to encourage you to file your application online. The benefits include that you get to put the information on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, that you get step-by-step instructions as you complete the form. You avoid common mistakes. You won't be able to submit the form if you haven't signed it. Certainly, we captured the correct filing fee, and you cannot leave any fields blank because when you are filing online, it won't let you proceed to the next field without completing it. Those are the top three reasons that applications are rejected. People don't sign them, they don't pay the proper filing fee, and they leave some fields blank. We've got an online calculator that you can use that can certainly help you determine what are the filing fees so that you have no mistakes. When you if you've been keeping up with our agency, you know that October 2nd is when our fees were supposed to have increased, but because of a court injunction, that fee increase did not become effective. If it had become effective, then the N-400 form would have gone up to $1,140 filing online and $1,460 filing by paper. And again, so during this period of time, while the fees have not increased, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to consider filing your application. Also, you have the benefit now of filing a fee waiver form I-912 or filing an I-924 form for a reduced filing fee of $320 for the Form N-400. And these fee waiver forms and the reduced filing fee form would not have been available any longer if the fee increase had taken effect. And so we understand that in this time, some people may have lost their jobs, and so not having a job does not mean that you're not eligible to file for naturalization. It just may mean you may not have the $725 filing fee. And so if you feel that you're eligible to file a fee waiver form, then go ahead and do so, because as of right now, you're eligible to submit it. And so remember, we use means income testing requirements, and so the poverty income guidelines that are issued by the Health and Human Services are the guidelines that we use. And so as I said, if you feel you're eligible, go ahead and do that now. You can go to the next slide, please. When we talk about completing the Form N-400, again, I've already talked about the fee waiver or the reduced fee filing. And again, all of our forms you can download for free. When we talk about USCIS.gov is the official website. There are some imposters out there, and especially now in this season, scams are all over. And so just like you've got scams to try to take your money for COVID resources or for income tax, IRS, Social Security, there are people out there who may feel that you don't know what you're talking about regarding immigration matters, and they say that they can promise you, oh, I've been in the United States for 10 years. Am I eligible to file for immigration benefit? And they promise you yes, even though you've got to be eligible for an immigration benefit under a particular section of law. And so again, when you file the N-400 application, you will get a filing receipt in the mail, and the benefit of filing online is you will get that receipt immediately. We'll send you an appointment notice to have your fingerprints and photo taken. We know that when the offices reopen that the application support centers do not open at the same time, and so there is a backlog in waiting to get your appointment. We know there's a backlog, and we're encouraging you to be patient. There are some applicants, we reuse the biometric information on file, and so we reuse the fingerprint information, and we reuse the photo information. And so again, as you're waiting for your appointment notice for the biometrics, we ask that you be patient. But also we ask that when you get that biometrics appointment notice, that you keep it. Because remember, if you don't keep your biometrics appointment notice, we could deny your application based on a consideration of abandonment. If you would go to the next slide, please. Again, when we talk about the benefits of online filing, we encourage you to create an online account. Again, we've already talked about the benefits, why you should file online, step-by-step instructions, only answer the questions that are applicable to you, avoiding those common mistakes, being able to upload supporting documents directly to your case. And that's a way for the officer also to notify you. If at the time of the interview they need additional documentation, you have the opportunity to upload that additional documentation if you have an online account. And you'll be able to securely and conveniently pay for the application fee at the time of filing. And those types of things add to your peace of mind, knowing that USCIS has your application. There is a video. I don't think I've got it attached to this presentation. USCIS has an official YouTube channel, and so there is a video that talks about the benefits of filing online, and there's a video that gives an example about how to create a new account. The videos are 2 minutes or less, and again, we want to encourage you. You can go to the next slide, please. We want to encourage you to consider creating an online account. Again, similar to, if you can go to the next slide, similar to creating your Amazon account when you were purchasing items for purchase, that's how simple we would like to think it is for you to create an online account. This My USCIS video is one of the ones that are online, and if I were uploading this presentation myself, I would be able to click on it, hopefully, to play. But as I said, you will be able to find this online on our website. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we've talked about the benefits of creating a USCIS account. You can file your form online. You can pay an application fee, check the status of your case, sign up for case alerts, access every notice we send you, respond to requests for evidence. You can change your address, and certainly you can still change your address filing the AR-11 paper form, but the benefit of filing it electronically is you get an acknowledgement immediately. You can submit a case status inquiry, and you can securely send us messages and get answers. And then you can access your personalized real-time information about your particular application. We encourage you to use our study materials. The next slide, please. To encourage you to use our study materials, including our Citizenship Resource Center. We have revised our website recently, and so again, as we talk about naturalization, these are the things that you will find on the website. Practice tests, study materials, vocabulary words to help you make up those sentences to practice reading and writing, videos, audio learning materials, finding an English or a civics class, and there's the materials for teachers also, or for people who are thinking about volunteering to help people prepare. Now, understand that somebody can help you prepare for the interview, but if somebody is helping you fill out the form, we want to make sure that they are not practicing the unauthorized practice of immigration law. It's one thing to help somebody fill out an application because they can write better than you or because they can navigate the computer better than you and help you create an online account. But when you start asking them questions like, again, regarding those good moral character questions, should I put down this traffic citation that I got 10 years ago, then we're talking about practicing immigration law. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so, again, these are our study tools that we have developed for you. We know that there are many imposters out there, but remember, we are the agency that administers immigration benefits, and so it is our duty, it is our role, especially our Office of Citizenship, to create study materials for you to be able to prepare you for the citizenship process. So you can download our USCIS Civics Test tool application from the App Store, the Apple App Store, or the Google Play Store, absolutely free. You can go to the next slide, please. And so, again, this just gives you another example of the study tools when you download the app, the things that you'll be able to do, the question challenge. You'll be able to view your past results, and you'll be able to see all of the questions, again, to help you prepare for the naturalization process. To the next slide, please. And so, again, we talked about your self-help tools that are available online. We talked about the USCIS.gov official webpage, checking your case status, changing your address, checking the process times. We know that currently the processing times may not be correct online because, again, remember, we were closed. And as we try to catch up and as we try to add interviews to our scheduling days, remember when we first opened up, our interviews were not as many as they were before, but by November we should be back up to the levels that we were before. It says make an InfoPass appointment, and this is no longer correct. You have to call our National Contact Center, 800-375-5283, and talk with an officer to determine whether or not an InfoPass appointment is needed. Before, you could make your own InfoPass appointment, but you can no longer do that. You have to call the contact center. Again, and that change was made so that the officers who would have to help people at the InfoPass counter can now be upstairs interviewing to help us with our backlog. You can find out additional information through the How Do I sheet. Again, you can download forms, do online filing, explore my options. Let's say you're not ready to file for naturalization and you need to replace your green card. Well, you can download the form, or let's say that you are petitioning for a relative and you need to find a doctor to do that immigration examination. You can find the local doctor, you can find citizenship classes, you can create an account on My USCIS, and you can ask Emma, our online virtual assistant. You can ask Emma in English and in Spanish questions that hopefully will help you navigate on the website to help you save time. Now, if you talk to Emma and Emma is not helpful, then we want you to provide that feedback to us, because how can we encourage you to use the online resources if the online resources are not useful? You can go to the next slide, please. When we talk about the self-help tools, again, this is an example of Emma. Our Spanish website portal has been upgraded, and so, again, any page on our website in English, you ought to be able to look at it in the Spanish version when you look up top and it asks you to go to Spanish. But again, make Emma better. Ask her the questions you want to ask. Ask them to her in English. Ask them to her in Spanish. And again, her role is to help you navigate our website so that you don't have to spend a lot of time looking. The next slide, please. And so we want to talk about being aware of predators and scam artists. Remember that the wrong help can hurt. Unfortunately, it is common for fraudulent practitioners to sell immigration forms and applications, even though they are free on our website. And you can download them from our website. Again, remember, if you are on a website and it asks you for a fee regarding a downloaded form, make sure that you are on the official one. Again, you can call our contact center number 800-375-5283, and you have to, again, watch out for those stories that sound too good to be true. Again, I have no immigration status. I've been here 20 years. You think I can get a green card? Sure you can. Give me $10,000 and I can help you out. Again, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Go to USCIS.gov/avoid scams. You will find resources to help protect you. You will find resources to help you find organizations that have applied to be recognized through the Department of Justice Office of Legal Assets Program, because you don't have to necessarily use a lawyer to help prepare your N-400 application. People ask, do I need a lawyer? That is certainly your personal choice, and we understand that some people cannot afford the filing fees of using a lawyer, and so we just want you to know that there are options out there, but make sure the options that you exercise are options for people that know exactly what they are doing. The next slide, please. So again, when we talk about needing legal assistance, that you contact the Department of Justice, I also want to talk a little bit about what else the Department of Justice does. Now, the E-Verify system is not related to naturalization, but it is the system that employers use to verify if you're authorized to work in the United States. But, you know, there are immigration rights that you have. There are laws that protect you. You cannot be discriminated against by an employer because of your immigration documents. And so the Department of Justice has an immigration rights portion, Employee Rights Center, and so again, you can call the hotline and get information for yourself, or you can call the hotline and report an employer who you feel is discriminating against you. Remember that immigration consultants cannot provide legal assistance, that they can only do simple clerical functions. To the next slide that talks about the disclaimers. Again, these are our reminders regarding your green card. All of the green cards should have a 10-year validity period. If you have less than 6 months on your green card, the expectation is that you will replace it. But if you're trying to determine, do I apply for naturalization, but my green card is expiring, can I apply? Excuse me, yes, we want you to apply for naturalization. And then if you need an added stamp showing evidence because your green card is expiring, then you can contact our contact center to have an appointment to come in to get an added stamp that shows evidence that you're a permanent resident. Remember, an expired green card is just an expired evidence. It's not expired status. Fill out a practice N-400 before you submit the original. You won't be able to bring it with you to the interview, but you need to be familiar, especially with those yes and no questions. Name changes. Remember, there is a name change section on the N-400, so if you want to change your name, the benefit of changing your name during the naturalization process is you only pay one filing fee. Now, the other benefit that could be an inconvenience, though, is that if you are requesting a name change, then USCIS does not have the authority to naturalize you under that name change. We will have to schedule you for a court ceremony. And I believe I understand for the Washington field office, over the past few days, I think we conducted our first virtual court naturalization ceremony where the applicants were in our ceremony room and the judge was Skyped in on the screen, and he naturalized those applicants who needed to change their names because the court is currently not open. But again, we all realize that. And so, again, if you qualify for an interpreter, have that interpreter available to be called on the phone. Give yourself extra time. We don't want you to come to your appointment earlier than 15 minutes. All of your additional documentation, supporting documentation, marriage licenses, driver's licenses, divorce decrees, all of those original documents, don't submit them with your application. The law does not require that you submit originals. And so you may need to bring them with you to the interview, but we don't want you to submit them and then ask us for them back because the process will be difficult. Now, there is a Form GA84 that you can file asking for the return of your original documents, but as I said, it's a lengthy process, and why do it when the law does not require you to do so? Can you go to the next slide, please? Again, traveling after you submit your application, be mindful of those trips, 6 months or less. Certainly, if it's more than a year, you could have possibly disrupted and affected your eligibility to file for naturalization. Make an appointment before visiting your local office. You can't just walk in. Be sure to update your address. And then certainly on that visitor policy portion of the USCIS website, if you're sick, stay home. We want you to protect yourself, and we want you to protect our employees. And so if you are sick, it is understandable. You are self-certifying when you enter our facility that you haven't had a fever, that you feel well. And again, if these things don't apply to you, then stay home and submit the paperwork that says why you need to be rescheduled. Again, at the ceremony, think it's not strange. We want to celebrate you. All the pomp and circumstance, though, has been taken away. We don't show videos at the ceremony. So a ceremony for naturalization can be finished in 10 minutes or less, believe it or not. We want you to go home and look at those videos on your own time. What a wonderful opportunity. Get some popcorn, gather the family around, celebrate naturalization, look at the videos that USCIS has online. And again, I challenge you from how I started off my conversation, what are 6 words that you could use to describe why you want to become a citizen? Next slide, please. This shows my contact information. Again, my name is Gloria Williams-Brevard. I'm the Community Relations Officer for District S21, which includes the jurisdictions of Maryland, D.C., Virginia, and North Carolina. I do want to reference our Norfolk Field Office email address because they are collateral duty community relations officers, and technically if you live in the jurisdiction, as I said, of the Pamunkey Regional Library, you fall under their jurisdiction. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me at washington.communityrelations at that address, or send it directly to the Norfolk Community Relations mailbox. If you send it to me and it's been misrouted, I promise you I will route it directly. And now I will take questions. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties of earlier. I hope it has not impacted our time together, but again, I am prepared for questions.
Thank you so much, Gloria. So I got a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to try to get through those first. So the first question is, someone would like to know how they can get a record of any like traffic citations or tickets or report histories in any states, like if they need those for the filing process.
Okay, so that's a wonderful question. And so traffic tickets or even dispositions of record, remember we talked about court-ordered child support or showing that you're paying taxes if you owe taxes. I would ask that you probably contact the DMV directly, and they should be able to issue you your driving record. And then if you've got any court issues, to go to the court clerk and ask for a court disposition. We had talked about possibly being on probation and finishing your probation requirement and not having any proof to show. Or if you had a DUI and you were required to file, to pay a fine or to report to classes or something, again, the court clerk. So the court clerk for court-related documents, DMV for DMV-related documents, the IRS for tax-related documents. That's a wonderful question.
And then the next question is, do you need to bring an unexpired passport during the interview? This person says that they're high risk and they kind of want to avoid leaving the house if they can. Okay, so if you are high risk, it is very important that when you get your interview notice that you notify us of why you cannot keep your appointment. Or if you feel that you need an accommodation request, there is a field on the N400 where you can check to say, please accommodate me. Remember I talked about that 103-year-old candidate, and we went to her home. Again,
putting all safety precautions in place. But if you are at high risk, we recognize that. And so, again, either notify us on the N400 form or certainly notify us as soon as you get that interview notice.
So another part of that question was, do you need a current unexpired passport during the interview, or?
So again, when we talk about the passport is a document that shows proof of your history of traveling. And so you put down your dates on your N400 application, but the unexpired passport will support that. The unexpired passport, canceled flight information. And so again, if the officer asks you for those documents, the benefit of filing online, remember, is you can upload that information electronically. But also, if the officer asks you, you still can create an account after your interview, and you can upload that information. And so we don't want you to have to go to your local embassy to get a new passport because the passport has expired. Again, the unexpired, the old passport is showing proof of your travel history. Also, we understand that there are some embassies that were closed and you wouldn't be able to replace it anyway.
Okay, great. And then the next question, someone had two questions. The first one being, they have two underage daughters and his wife and him. Do they all received a green card at the same time? Should they submit a form N400 for each member of the family or just the adults?
So that's a wonderful question. So I did not emphasize when I first started talking about the naturalization filing process. There is a question on the N400 that asks you, were one or both of your parents, did they become citizens at the time you were under the age of 18? And so it is very important that you look at that question. If that applies to you, if one or both of your parents became citizens and you were under the age of 18, there is a possibility that you don't have to file that N400 form and that you may have already derived citizenship. The same is true for if you have children who are lawful permanent residents who are in your custody, and on the day you become a citizen, they are under the age of 18. Excuse the plane flying over. They are under the age of 18. On the day you become a citizen, they also become a citizen, but you have no evidence that they are citizens. And most people take their naturalization certificate and their children's green cards, and they go to the passport office, and they apply for U.S. passports for both themselves and their children, and which for most people satisfies. But if you wanted us to change in our computer system the fact that your children are citizens, then you will have to file a form N600 form on behalf of each child, and that will cause the actions for us to update our databases. But most people don't have to do that because, as I said, they go to the U.S. passport with the children's green card, with their naturalization certificate, and they get U.S. passports because the law says that the children have derived citizenship.
Great. And then the next question is, if I have to change my address during the time taken for the naturalization to be evaluated, is there a process to notify USCIS of that change of address?
Certainly. So again, when we talked about what are my online processes available, services that are available for me to do for myself. So you can file a change of address AR11 form electronically, or you can download the paper form from the website and mail it to our Harrisonburg, Virginia facility, and they will update the address. But as I said, you don't have to create an account to file the AR11. You can file the AR11 electronically, and the benefit is you will get an acknowledgement that we have changed the address, and you will get an acknowledgement in the mail, especially if something happens and we, for some reason, did not update our database. You will have proof that you had changed your address and that you had done it with us accordingly.
All right, great. And then the next question, do any days outside of the United States, even if just a few days, count against the 5-year period?
And so again, remember, any time you are outside of the United States for 24 hours, 24 hours equals 1 day. 48 hours equals 2 days. 72 hours equals 3 days. so on and so on and so on. And so, again, when we talk about continuous residency requirement and physical presence requirement, for all the time that you are outside of the United States, can you show that you are inside of the United States to satisfy that requirement of the 900 and something days, half of the time of 5 years, and the half of time of 3 years? And as I said, that's why we said it's cumulative. But the responsibility is upon you to make sure that all that time adds up. People have asked, okay, I went out for a trip, and I don't have the 913 days. I don't have it in front of me. I have 910 days. Can I submit my application? Well, if you're 3 days short for satisfying that physical presence requirement, we can go ahead and interview you, and then you get a denial in the mail that says you are denied your N-400 application because you did not satisfy that physical presence requirement. And even though you will be mad at us and say, but it was only 3 days, remember, it is your responsibility to be eligible for the N-400 naturalization process at the time of filing.
Yeah, there's actually a similar question here. So I think you kind of just covered this, but somebody asked if you can apply 4 months ahead of the 5-year period.
So you can apply 3 months ahead, 90 days in advance, whether you're applying based on being married to a U.S. citizen or based on having permanent residency for 5 years. You can apply 90 days in advance. And so there is an online calculator that when you put in the permanent resident, the date since I've been a permanent resident, it will let you know when you are eligible to file, taking into account that 90-day beforehand. Not 91 days, not 92 days, not 95 days, but 90 days prior to.
And then another person is asking, what is the name of the fee waiver form?
I-912.
I-912. Okay. And then where can I find a list of the documents that need to be submitted? I would like to have them ready at the time to submit the application.
Okay. When you go to our website, so right on the home page, because it is a commonly requested form, it should have the form N-400 right on the home page where you can click on it, and it will bring up what are the filing fee requirements, what is the eligibility requirement, the basic requirement, and it'll have a chart. So there's an M476 naturalization guide online that you can look at that gives helpful information. It has a helpful flow chart. If this, then this. If this, then this. It gives you guidance for how do you determine if you've got the physical presence requirement information inside. And so the basic requirement is you file the N-400 form and the back and front copy of your permanent resident card. And certainly if you're filing based on being married to a U.S. citizen, a copy of the marriage certificate. And if you've been married more than one time, now that doesn't mean you don't have good moral character. It just may mean that you had to find more opportunities to get to your final love. But we want to see that you divorce all of those previous spouses. And so, again, if this is not your first marriage, it's your second marriage or your third marriage, then you've got to show the divorce decree for marriage number 2 and marriage number 1.
And then someone is asking if you can explain the timeline after submitting the application until getting the passport.
So the timeline, this is where it becomes a little tricky. Again, when we talk about processing times, I can only give you very general examples. There is a form G1145, I believe, that you can file with the N-400 form, and we will send you a text when we receive your application while you're waiting for the I-797 notice of action formal receipt notice. Certainly, again, remember the benefit of online filing is you will get the acknowledgement of the receipt immediately upon completion of filing. And so, again, there was an ombudsman's call today, and they had certain representatives of the agency, and they did not say that there were any backlogs in the filing of receipts or in the making of the receipts to send out. And so I'm going to say allow yourself ample time. So when you file the N-400 application, give us maybe 6 to 8 weeks to get that initial receipt. And if you haven't received it, and especially if you filed electronically and you didn't get it. But let's say you filed by the mail and you got evidence that we cashed your check or your money order and you still have not gotten the receipt. There is a lockbox email that is online where you can send email to say what happened to my application, proof of filing. And so I would give a generous 6 to 8 weeks to get the initial filing receipt, and I don't know at this point, maybe 4 to 6 months, maybe up to 4 months to get the appointment for biometrics processing. We just want you to be patient, and then maybe an additional 4 6 months for the appointment notice filing. And so you see I have stretched it out a long time, again, without looking at what the website says for current filing time.
Great, thank you so much, Gloria. All right, I'm just going to do 2 more questions since we're running a little bit at a time.
Okay, and I apologize if my phone dies, but go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So do you think asking to change my name on the form will delay my application?
I don't think that it will.
Did her phone die? Gloria, are you still there?
I think her phone died.
Okay, well, that was the last question. Someone else asked if we could share the presentation. I will ask Gloria after to see if I can send it out to everybody who participated or if we can post it on our website. So I will, sorry, what?
We try to discourage from posting the presentation,
Okay.
but we can talk about it.
Okay, well, or if there's something similar on the website that people can reference that we could post, something like that. That was just the last question.
Certainly, certainly.
Okay, great. Is there anything else before we end the presentation?
So I want to emphasize.
You were going to answer if someone asked about the name change on the application. I think you were going to answer that.
Okay, and so again, the name change on the application, you can fill out the application and put that there. The only impact it will have is if you do the name change, we cannot administratively naturalize you. You will have to be naturalized by a judge. And so again, I gave the example of in the past couple of days at the Washington field office, we had our first remote ceremony where the judge was shown on the screen and the applicants were in our ceremony room, and the judge naturalized those persons who had requested their names to be changed so that they did not have to travel to the court.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to stop the Q&A portion there, but I left Gloria's information up on the PowerPoint. So if you guys want to take down her information, if you have any more questions, or feel free to reach out to Pamunkey Regional Library at ask@pamunkeylibrary.org. You can email us with any questions. Gloria, is there anything else you'd like to say before we end the presentation?
I'd just like to emphasize to people that if you go to uscis.gov/outreach, our outreach events should be listed. In this virtual environment, you probably will see many events listed. You will see my colleagues from California. You will see my colleagues from Florida. And even for myself, I try to distribute the invitations. And this is our first evening event, and I would imagine that for many people it was more beneficial. We have held several lunchtime events, but we want your feedback. So if nothing else, you can send me an email and say, Gloria, I like the presentation. Gloria, could you, except for the technical difficulties, Gloria, can you provide it during this time? If you represent an organization and you want me to do the presentation for your organization, or if you're a citizenship instructor and you want me to do the presentation for your students, then reach out to me, because again, this is what we're doing. We're bringing the USCIS information to you. And whether or not you agree, remember again, it is our job to administer the immigration laws. Again, you have a role in being entitled to what you're applying for. You have a role in having rights. Again, when we talk about E-Verify and when we talk about case status and SAVE and those other types of programs. And certainly when you file an application and something happens at the interview, you have the right to ask for a supervisor. So even though we're going to take your $725 graciously, remember, you are choosing to become a citizen. And again, my challenge to you is to think, what are 6 words that would describe why you want to be a citizen? Again, I want to thank you for spending a portion of your evening with us. And again, I want to thank the Pamunkey Library. And if you think they need to repeat this session, tell them that. Again, this is my first opportunity partnering with them. And if there's other information that you would like to know, certainly let them know. Again, thank you for your time tonight.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming. I think someone just asked for Gloria's email. It's still up on the screen. You can reach her at washington.communityrelations@uscis.dhs.gov. And I'm going to stop recording now. But again, thank you for stopping by. And if you're interested in any other programs at our library, you can visit our website or follow us on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.